What's good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason, and we are back here for another one. And tonight I'm joined by a very special guest for the first half hour of the show, Alex Rollins of AlexRollinsNFL. You can find him on YouTube. Just go ahead and search Alex Rollins NFL, and he'll pop back up. He did a video about a week ago on Tua Tagovailoa, and he posed the question: Is Tua time up yet? How you doing, Alex? How's everything going tonight?
Doing good, man. Your intro got me fired up. There, I'm ready to get into it, man. Chop it up.
Appreciate it, man. So let's hop right into it. No, not going to waste any time here because I know you're pressed for it. Um, you're just for those that haven't seen it. Okay, I've watched it multiple times. I even watched it as a refresher, but a half hour ago. Can you just give everyone the gist of what you saw in Tua Tagovailoa's rookie year? Because I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory, but there's a theory amongst a lot of Dolphin fans, those who watch tape, and then it's trickled down to those who don't watch tape, that basically Gailey, this offense was more catered to Ryan Fitzpatrick, and that last year, sorry, and that, you know, some people say two different playbooks, but there wasn't two different playbooks. But people were saying it almost seemed like there was two different playbooks when Ryan Fitzpatrick was in compared to when Tua Tagovailoa was in there. Can you just give us the gist of your video, because you did touch on that a lot, and you didn't even know any of that I just said, that little bickering that's been going on in the Dolphins community.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of different ideas floating around, and I definitely read this stuff on Twitter, and I get all these different voices on Dolphins Twitter, and letting me know what people agree with and don't. There's a lot going on here. I feel like there's so many different moving parts, especially last offseason kind of going into it. And I would say it doesn't seem like I don't think there was a set plan to say, hey, we're going to draft Tua here at this time and then go from there. It seems like there's many kind of almost like the plan is a tree, and the branches are just growing in different directions, and there's not just one set course for ultimately making Tua. This was a plan that we needed when Flores took over, and it seems like it's veered in different ways, whereas the right way to do it is to build slowly in the right direction and end up where Tua is a good quarterback, because he does have a lot of skills. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. So, when looking at even just last year and then the year before, we won't get so much into the Chad O'Shea stuff, but anytime you hire an offensive coordinator and he's gone after a year, that's just a red flag. That's what happened there. We have a plan. We need to implement. The reason why the Patriots were so good is because they had a system in place, and Brady grew into that system, and the system grew around him for 20 years, or I guess, 18 or 19 or whatever. But he learned in that system, and he grew, and the language didn't change, and the checks didn't change, and he had more and more answers. Whereas once we get rid of O'Shea, once we get rid of Gailey, all of a sudden we're not growing towards something, So that's definitely a bit of a red flag for me. To what you were saying, I think the playbook, as you said, it was the same. It seemed like it was Fitzpatrick's playbook, and then some college stuff jammed in once Tua got in there. So it didn't seem like we had a plan in place to draft Tua with Gailey and have him grow with Gailey. It just seemed like a bunch of different ideas kind of coming together that didn't really work out.
Now, when I'm going to tell you something that I was told, and I want to get your thoughts on when you hear this and now when you look back at the film and you've seen Gailey and everything. So before the Gailey hire, from what I was told, Ryan Fitzpatrick was approached and he was asked about recommending an offensive coordinator that could help the Dolphins not only move forward with Ryan Fitzpatrick for at least a year, but also develop a young quarterback as well in the system. Are you surprised? Well, I know you're not surprised that Fitzpatrick would suggest Chan Gailey given their success together. But are you surprised that they would have moved forward with a guy like that? Who, Alex, I know, like you know, like I know, I'm sure you know, Chan Gailey's never been known as a guy who develops young quarterbacks. I mean, we can't even sit here and probably name one. Are you surprised they went that route with a guy who he was retired? Word leaked out that he had even gone as far as throwing out his notes on defensive coordinators across the NFL when he retired, and was inquiring with his friends across the NFL for their notes on certain defensive coordinators he was going to face. And that's how bad it got. Are you surprised the Dolphins went from Chad O'Shea to kind of a old school, more archaic type of play caller like Chan Gailey, when, like the story I told you, they didn't specifically say Tua Tagovailoa, but they knew they were drafting a quarterback. Are you surprised they would go with a guy like Chan Gailey?
Yeah, and I just question what the plan was if everything had worked out. We saw Chan retire, or maybe there was some issues where they were going to fire him anyway, and so he said, "All right, I'm retiring."
Yeah,
almost like a George Costanza or something. But after 1 year, he's gone. I can't get over that. I am surprised by it, and I think he was very old coming into this. He had already worked with Fitzpatrick twice. So I'm wondering, it's really interesting because you would think Justin Herbert, and I'm not saying, it looks like Herbert is at a more developed point than Tua. I don't think many would argue that right now. But I don't really like going revisionist history and saying, oh my God, what are they doing, et cetera, et cetera. I do wonder if they were going to build and implement more of a Fitzpatrick-based system with Gailey, why they didn't go with a Herbert, or they just seems like such a complete polar opposite in terms of Fitzpatrick and Tua, and just some of the inherent things that you need to build an offense around. I mean, Tua is just such a completely different player. It really blows my mind. And going back kind of to your first question, I think the personnel that the Dolphins had in terms of their skill position players was really, when I started researching for the episode and just looking at how the Dolphins were managing things, these were very much Fitzpatrick-based weapons, where these are bigger guys. They're going to win a lot of the isolation stuff, which we'll touch on in a second. They're not Tua needs it's rhythm. He needs a rhythm-based system, and these guys are going to go up one-on-one, and Devontae Parker is incredibly good at that, and Mike Gesicki is incredibly good at that, and they're going to muscle you off the ball, and they are good route runners, but speed is not their forte. And we didn't really have any of those type of guys. We had Jakeem Grant, but he hasn't shown a high level of success in the NFL per se. And I guess Albert Wilson was injured. So it just, all of this seems so geared towards Fitzpatrick. I'm just wondering, there seems like there was some turmoil at the front office where what was the plan here? Was it maybe somebody did want Herbert, or maybe we just weren't planning at all for Tua? It just, there's so many questions. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm confused by it, honestly.
So you said something there, Key. Did someone want Herbert? And from what I understand, and Dan Marino has an executive role with the Miami Dolphins, right? Like as a what do you call it? As kind of a advisor role. From what I understand, Dan Marino was pro Herbert. From what you know who Jason LaCanfora is, obviously, too, right?
Mm-hmm, of course.
Okay. Jason LaCanfora put out an article last week, and let's just back up for a sec here. So Jason LaCanfora put out an article a couple days after the allegations hit with Deshaun Watson. Okay. I know someone who's really locked in with the Philadelphia Eagles organization. He messaged me the night before this Jason LaCanfora article came out, and he told me, hey, the Eagles have made multiple offers on Deshaun Watson, but San Francisco and Miami are leading the way. All right. Fast forward to the very next morning, Jason LaCanfora put out an article, and it was talking about how the Eagles were making offers for Deshaun Watson. And in that same article, he said that the Dolphins wanted to trade back up to 6 the way they did from 12 because they wanted to make sure they got one of the Bama boys, either Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. And now we've seen the draft play out. We saw that, we weren't, apparently we had Jalen Waddle as the number 2 ranked player on our board behind Trevor Lawrence, just like people saw the Jacksonville Jaguars had that through their little documentary, right? They weren't the only one.
Oh my God.
Anyways, where I'm going with this is this. Last week, Jason Lockenfora put out an article where he predicted like offensive rookie of the year, offensive MVP, all that jazz, okay? In one part, it's called First Botch QB. It talks about Tua Tagovailoa. And he said that word is from high-ranking officials in other organizations, not in the Miami Dolphins, but you know how it works, Alex. People talk, people have friends in other organizations, et cetera, et cetera. High-ranking officials in other organizations have said that Flores is not all in on Tua Tagovailoa and that he was in the pro Herbert camp. And so when you hear something like that, you know, I was at the firm belief of the way this thing was going with Watson and everything. I don't think Flores wanted a quarterback at 5, a defensive-minded guy. I don't think he did, but here we are, you know. I think, you know, if you go back to the 2018 draft, word is Greer was rolling around that draft in Atlanta telling anyone who would listen backstage, I'm going to draft Tua Tagovailoa when I have the chance, because it was just after the national championship win, right? So when you say that, when you look at this offense in kind of a confused manner, and you hear what I just said about Jason Lockenfora, does that kind of make more sense to you now?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think I was somebody who was very anti-Herbert, to be honest with you, coming out of the draft. So I've completely put my foot in my mouth on that one.
Yep. So have I.
But yeah, stylistically, we just that it's so important, and to from the front down, from the top down, excuse me, from the offensive personnel, from the scheme, everything needs to be aligned. And I was higher on Tua than Herbert, and there was a pretty sizable gap there, in my opinion, coming out. And I just didn't see nearly as much as what I saw Tua doing really well at Alabama. He didn't really have the opportunity to do that last year, and a lot of that was his fault. Like there's no doubt about that. It's not like there was the OC was just calling things to screw him or things like that. The report came out that he didn't really know the playbook, and I want to touch on that too. I've seen a lot on Twitter that's almost like a good thing, because now that he knows the playbook, that he's going to be that much better, and he's going to have the big year 2 jump. I mean, Herbert and Burrow knew the playbook, and they had the same offseason. I know Tua had the hip and whatnot, but that's something. When you watch his game and you watch what he excelled at Alabama, it was clear that the pre-snap elements and the ability to get through his progressions and go 1, 2, 3, 4, that was where he was going to separate himself, and what he was really good at, and why he was so good. And so because he was so removed from that, and also not really showing the mental aspects that I was expecting to see with Miami, that's where I start to be really concerned and say, okay, well, why didn't you know the playbook? Maybe it was more advanced because Fitz had the prior history with Gailey and whatnot, but the other rookie quarterbacks looked pretty dang good with the same offseason. So that's something I'm definitely worried about for sure.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, he put up almost identical numbers to Joe Burrow. And, you know, we talked about this before on live here. You know, the thing is, those playbooks were a little bit more catered towards those guys than what he dealt with. But I agree, you know, I don't expect a rookie in his rookie season to learn 80% of the playbook. That's a lot to take in for a rookie. But I wanted to talk about this because we touched on it a little bit earlier. You know, the isolation, all right, how it was more of an isolation offense, getting those 50-50 matchups, those jump balls, because we had more high point guys in terms of Gesicki and DVP and even Preston Williams. You know what I mean? Can you just talk a little bit about what you saw in terms of explain the isolation offense you saw play itself out, and as opposed to what kind of more in depth of what kind of offense needs to be ran to cater towards more of Tua's style?
Certainly. That's a great question. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways to at least attempt to isolate a receiver, and coaches have been trying to do that for God knows how long. But the way that Gailey was trying to do it last year, and if you go to NFL Game Pass and turn it on, just go to the All 22, This pops up all the time, both with Fitzpatrick and with Tua, and Gailey just kept doing it and doing it. And it's not necessarily bad, but it's just not necessarily geared towards Tua's strengths. So one of the most typical things they did to try and isolate a receiver is they put, for example, 3 receivers to the right side and then just 1 receiver to the left. So that's on the left with the one-on-one. If you see a one-on-one, that's called your alert. And so if we see before the snap starts, before the play starts, if we see that guy is one-on-one, we're just going to take that, and it was usually a fade ball. And so you're saying, okay, the safety's not over there. Nobody's over top. We don't see any kind of bracket or cone coverage or anything. We like the one-on-one. We're paying Devontae Parker. We're paying Mike Gesicki big money. We just want those guys to try and win. And if you look at the 49ers game, for example, with Fitzpatrick, he was just bombs away. He was bombs away with these alert style concepts. And he was taking the alert. The 49ers pretty frequently give you the backside one-on-one, and Fitz was awesome with it. So when we go a little later in the season and we see Tua, it's basically the same stuff. And he did have some success in the Cardinals game, and that's why we did see him with some of that deep ball success, which didn't necessarily happen throughout the rest of the season. But we did see some of that success with the one-on-one stuff down the field. And that was just the Cardinals were giving him that one-on-one matchup on the left. So if there is a safety or some kind of two-man coverage on the one receiver, then there's just a concept, which is double slants or stick, something like that, to try and manipulate certain defenders and get a different guy open. So that's more the style that Tua is going to excel in, more the concept stuff. And what's tricky is for somebody like Tua who needs to be in rhythm, who needs to get through his progressions, if you are looking at the alert as the play starts, that's going to mess up all your concept stuff backside. So now we're not developing as much. And think about it when we're in practice, if we are practicing the isolation style offense, we're not normally going through a lot of the concepts on the backside, on the right side in this example. Those are going to be concepts that are going to be run. They don't change that much based on if we're doing the isolation style offensive or not. So those are the kind of things where Tua is then not getting in the normal comfort of the play call. He was leaving the pocket a lot, and I think there are a variety of reasons, including not knowing the playbook, but also being late from the alert, not hitting that, being late on the concept, and then just kind of panicking and scrambling. So that's what I'm talking about when the isolation aspects come up. You know, there were some balls where he really had to kind of jam them into Gesicki over the middle. There's this one specific route that kind of changes based on where the safeties are, that Fitzpatrick would pretty much just look to the right and then just say, just to get the safeties to move, and then just say, I'm jamming this son of a gun right up the middle to Gesicki, because that's what I do, because I'm Fitzmagic. And that's just not Tua. You know, that's not who he is. That's not his play style. That's not really, doesn't play to his strengths. And I saw an interesting stat that really jumped out to me. Tua and Fitz were both it's a stat from Next Gen Stats. It's called aggressive percentage.
Stats, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's when you throw the ball to a receiver, is there a defender within 1 yard of him?
Yeah.
And they were both at the highest.
Yeah, they were top 3. They're both top 3.
Yes. But I think that's interesting, though. I don't think that means they're necessarily the most aggressive. I think it speaks more to the style of offense they were in. So in ISO ball, defenders are going to be all over them. And with Devontae Parker, with Preston Williams, Mike Gesicki, these aren't separators. These are guys who, have muscle and are going to beat you up and win the jump ball. So I think the personnel changing with Waddle and Fuller, as we mentioned, that's something I was very happy to see for Tua, because we're starting to get towards the style that he can excel in. And we're not just saying, all right, man, we have good enough weapons, just go out there and get better. So that was very exciting. And I'm very interested to see. Little concerned about 2 offensive coordinators. I don't really know what to think about that, especially I don't believe either of them really have too deep of a
Godsey
about
was the offensive coordinator in 2015 for the Houston Texans, back when they had Savage and Brandon Whedon and all those jabronis, as I call them. And the four of them, he actually had the 15th best passing attack in the NFL with those guys.
Yeah, I just
We'll see.
two offensive coordinators. I don't understand that. I hope the power dynamic is set, and I hope Flores. I believe Flores knows what he's doing, but definitely a little concerning. But back to the overall isolation aspects of the offense. That's really what we're talking about when it's really focusing on those one-on-one balls and just saying our guys are better than yours, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about the aggression rate, something that has to be put into context too is when you compare Tua to Herbert and Burrow, Herbert, the average separation of his top two targets was about 2.5 yards. Burrow was about 2.6. Tua was about 1.85. Tua also had about his time to throw on average is about 2.55. Burrow was 2.65, and Herbert was about 2.69. So he had less time to throw the ball, and he had less almost a full yard between the two of them and less separation. So that kind of stuff matters, especially when you talk about like what we're talking about. He comes from that RPO, that pro style based offense in Alabama, where it's all about separation. Right. Definitely an adjustment. And, they went out and they drafted Jalen Waddle. They went out and they signed Will Fuller. Albert Wilson opted out last year because of COVID, because he was having a baby. So he's back right now. And apparently he's just balling out at practice right now. When you add those three receivers to the mix, those are guys who can stretch the field vertically, or they can really kill you underneath because of their speed, right? I've shown the video. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Waddle in his freshman year ran up against Henry Ruggs in a 40 as a sophomore, and they finished neck and neck at the goal line on a 40-yard dash. And we all know Henry Ruggs ran a 4.27. Josh Jacobs came out in Waddle's freshman season and said, he legit has 4.27 speed. I know he was the fastest, I think, since they introduced GPS, the GPS timing that they've been, the GPS tracking they've been doing at the collegiate level. I don't know if you noticed it, but they've been doing it for like the last 3 or 4 years. Yep. I believe Jalen Waddle is the fastest they've tracked in the last 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
So that's another reason why I don't think he ran his 40 this year. Anyways, my point being is, by the addition of Albert Wilson returning from COVID, Will Fuller, and now Jalen Waddle, and what I told you before we went live here about Najee Harris saying to Pat McAfee, around the Senior Bowl, that he read our playbook and it's really essentially the same as what they ran at Alabama, just it's more the terminology is different. Then they go and who did they add? They added the new quarterback coach is Charlie Fry, right? Who was with Tua at the Elite 11, and they've been friends ever since the Elite 11. Studesville and Godsey were both in the building last year. Godsey tight ends coach, Studesville running back coach. Godsey ran the offense in the Arizona game, which they found some of the most success. So they're trying to keep that continuity to some degree. When you look at the weapons they've added, are these the guys you're talking about catering more to his play style?
Definitely. I'm very excited about Waddle. I think if Tua is going to have success, I think he's going to be one of the primary reasons. I'm really interested to see what they do with Will Fuller. Tua, his strength is not throwing the ball deep, and where we've seen Will Fuller have the most success is with Watson just bombing the ball over everybody's head. So I'm very interested to see if Fuller's going to be more of the intermediate guy. I know they're putting Waddle in the slot, and I really like that. And I think Tua, the rapport with him and Tua will be critical. I can't stress that enough. And it'll be interesting to see if Fuller, like I just said, is that intermediate guy and not if he's just taking the top off the defense. From what I've seen from Tua, that's not going to be there. That's just not going to be maximizing Fuller's capability in this offense. So I'm very excited about those pieces. I'm still Dolphins Twitter has been slandering the hell out of Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki. I'm seeing when I put out the video, everybody's saying like Tua didn't have any weapons. I'm like, hey, Devontae Parker's had 1,200 yards, man. And Gesicki's a dude. So they weren't incredible weapons. We're talking about how they didn't really fit with Tua per se, but these guys are established NFL players. So I'm excited to still see what Devontae Parker can do with those kind of different elements and within this different offense. And Gesicki, I really like Gesicki. I think he is a legitimate difference maker. So now we have a lot of weapons for Tua. Maybe we had average weapons. Maybe I think they were above average, but now we have a lot of weapons. So I'm excited. Yes. I think one thing that Dolphins fans can look at week 1 and say, okay, is our guy Tua better? Tua is not a running quarterback. He had you can find his highlights on YouTube, and yeah, he juked a couple guys, but when he's escaping the pocket, that's not where he wants to be. The play is dead at that point, essentially.
His strength is climbing the pocket, resetting his feet, and making the throw.
Exactly. And when you're rhythm based, when you're all about timing, when we're escaping the pocket, it's no good. So if we're seeing Tua sit in there, be comfortable, I know the O-line is there are some issues there. So especially for a rookie quarterback, one could see why it would be more difficult to sit in that pocket, especially if you don't know the playbook as well. That's definitely a concern if you're a quarterback. But I think Tua, he's very coachable. I think his character is incredible. I think him escaping the pocket like that is something that can be coached out of him. And if he is more comfortable with this new playbook, that he will have comfort sitting in there and not escaping. But I will say if it was very frustrating to watch on film. So if that's something that keeps happening, that's where I'd say, okay, I'm very worried. This guy hasn't really seemed to make that much progress in the offseason when I think with Burrow and I think with Herbert, their year 2 jump, even if it's minimal, it's so much more critical for Tua to have. Tua needs to have a very large jump. It has to be very large. Mm-hmm. And I think even if we just see a slight increase with Herbert and Burrow, there's not really much of a worry. But it's a big year for Tua. And I wasn't trying to say with my video, I know some people saw the Tua time is up. That was just the question. That was not a statement.
And they came for you, huh?
Yeah, they came for me. And hey, I'm ready for it. I respect it.
I know you're pressed for time. I just got 2 questions I want to ask you before you get out of here.
Sure.
First, a statement, and I just wanted to know whether before I get to the 2 questions, a statement. Mm-hmm. I know you probably watched a lot of them at Bama too. Did you notice at the top of his drops, he was taking like an extra little hop step? He never did that at Bama, but all of a sudden at the top of his drops last year, he was doing this little, I know you talked about the extra hitches he was taking, mm-hmm. but at the top of his drops, he was doing this little bop, little hop step. And I was like, what are you doing? Because there was one play, I want to say it was a Kansas City game, where Gesicki was open over the seam and he had to throw it in between the bracket, and he did, but he threw it a little bit late because of that extra hop he took at the top of his drop, and Gesicki ended up getting smacked as soon as he made the catch instead of being able to catch the ball, come down and make a play. I don't know if you noticed it, but that's something else I noticed about Tua. There was just a lot of stuff I saw that I didn't see at Bama, and just his fundamentals and his techniques. But anyways, my first question out of the 2 I have before you get out of here, because you watched so much of it, what did you think of the offensive line? I know you touched on it a little bit there, because all we've done this year is add Liam Eichenberg, who's apparently kicking from left tackle at Notre Dame. He's going to play right tackle. Robert Hunt's moving into guard, and we upgraded by putting Matt Skura over Ted Karras at center. But, Kinley's at left guard, Austin Jackson's at left tackle. So really a lot of the same guys. And I really feel like, and I know you probably got the sense, there were times where you could tell he didn't trust the protection. That's why he wasn't climbing. And it almost came by the end of the season, as I'm sure you noticed by the time you're watching the all 22, by the time he got in, he was just automatically bailing. He wasn't even thinking of climbing. It was snap. Oh, I feel the pressure. I'm out. And that's not to his game. And I just want to get your thoughts on the offensive line, and if you think Tua didn't trust the protection to a certain extent.
No, I certainly agree. It was problematic, no doubt. And I think there's always a chicken and egg question. Is it bad protection? Is the quarterback bad? Who are the sacks on? Who's the pressure on? I do think it was interesting. I mean, Tua seemed like he was under constant duress, and maybe because he was just scrambling out of the pocket, the pressure numbers weren't, jotted down or whatever by the people who took down the numbers. But he was 28th in pressure percentage. It was just 29%. And I was very surprised. I think there are plenty of issues on the offensive line, and I'm definitely hoping for significant improvement with those additions or changes that you just mentioned. But yeah, just yes. There was a lot of issues even with just picking up stunts, which is something
terrible,
that just needs to be. It was absolutely terrible, and it's just something that needs to be repped over and over and over. And yeah, if you're a quarterback standing in there, a lot of times stunts, when a stunt comes free, it's not because they're bringing extra guys. It's just because your offensive line isn't picking it up correctly.
Yeah.
And that pressure can hit you instantly. And if that's happening a couple times, and just imagine sitting back there and you don't know the playbook and you just are not comfortable and you don't trust the protection. It's a lot of bad just compiling and compounding. That's not good. So
Yeah.
I think it'll be important 100%. I want to see a lot more production out of the play action pass game. That was one of Tua's strengths in Alabama, and his numbers actually got worse when we were doing play action last year. So I that'll help the protection. You aren't going to have guys just sprinting straight up field all the time, and that will Jalen Waddle, if he gets a route right behind the linebackers who are sucked up from the play action, he can take that thing 80. So can Will Fuller. So that's something that would help the protection. It would give Tua more help with things that he's been good at in the past. I think those things will be critical to making the protection better, as well as hopefully the additions that you just mentioned.
All right, guys, we got about 290 people in the room. Go ahead, smash that like button. My last question, Alex, before I let you go here. Nick Hicks, the man who Tua has been training with this offseason out of Perform in South Florida, where a lot of actually, Singletary's been, Devin Singletary's been there. J.K. Dobbins have been working out there. A lot of guys have been working out there this offseason. He came out and he said that Tua Tagovailoa at best was at about 60% health-wise last year when he was starting, because remember, he's only 351 days removed from that traumatic injury by the time he actually had his first start. Tua's talked about it. Nick Hicks, his trainers, talked about it. He was using a lot of upper body to throw the football. I talk about this all the time. There was a dig route against the Oakland Raiders where the ball just died on him. It's like a 10-yard dig right before it got to Gesicki, and you never saw that with Tua ever. And he's talked about it. His trainer talked about how he was really using pure, mostly upper body strength. Devontae Parker's come out this year. He said, I've noticed improved footwork. I've noticed improved mechanics with Tua Tagovailoa. And you know how the quarterback position is. It's a kinetic chain. It's all about kinetic energy from your toes all the way to your fingertips with that ball coming out, right? So when you take everything into context of what you saw from him last year, his throwing strength, his motion and everything, and then it sets in that he was only at 60% health from what people are saying close to him. Just your thoughts on that, because I mean, do you think that's irresponsible for a coaching staff? Because if his trainer knows that, the Dolphins medical staff must have known that. And even let's put an extra 10%. Let's say he was 70%. As a rookie still learning the offensive playbook, he had a rehab body. If you notice at Alabama, he was always ripped from the bottom up. And last year he had a lot of baby fat. His lower half was, looked way bigger than his upper half. And that's basically because rehab body, he's making sure that he's leveling out those hips, right? Working on those glutes. So what are your thoughts when you hear that his camp coming out and saying, Tua was only at 60% health last year? Do you treat last year as we saw Tua's floor? Do you see it as an anomaly and we haven't seen his floor yet, let alone what's his ceiling? Just when you hear that and you put that into context with everything you saw from him last year, what does that make you think?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. It definitely makes me the whole year. It was so confusing why they benched Fitzpatrick. And I feel like the more we hear about these little things that come out like that, why did we bench Fitzpatrick? I mean, I know they were 3-3 and Tua went 7-3. So that's definitely a feather in his cap. It just didn't make sense. And especially if he was at 60% and they were risking injury and they felt confident enough in him to spend a 5th overall pick. I mean, this is a 5th overall pick in a pretty loaded just draft all around. Why, if they had those injury concerns, why would they bench Fitzpatrick? And then why would they flip him in and out of the lineup? The whole thing was very strange. So as I said, I was big on Tua. I don't think physical ability was ever the main part of his game. I don't think it was necessarily.
It was a neck up. It was a neck up, right?
Exactly. I think in college, it was slightly above average. So it wasn't great. I mean, his arm and his physical ability. And then last year, it was something that was like, oh, this might be an issue now. So if it is that he was at 60% and now we're going to see a 30-40% increase, then that would be huge. I think the mental aspect, like I said, is going to be where he finds himself being successful in the NFL. And so even with increased arm strength, or let's say all of a sudden he's just slinging it 80 yards, if the mental aspect's still what it was last year, then I'm still super worried, honestly, because that's where I saw special qualities in Tua. And I think there needs to be, I think one of the things I really remember liking about him was ability to manipulate defenders, second level defenders,
size.
And then and just in rhythm. He was doing to do that at a college level, at the level he was doing. I got really excited, and I was excited to see him on the Dolphins, and I'm excited to see him do that in 2021. But it's those kind of things where, like we've talked about, the quick hitting stuff, concepts, progressions, mental ability, having a plan for each play. I don't think he had a plan. And I really hope that's where those offensive coordinators are going to help him just feel confident. Because like you said, he didn't feel confident. He didn't feel good about the plays. He didn't feel good about the protection. He needs to have a plan. And
probably too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You're already, and just all those things you're thinking about that aren't going straight forward into what we need to be thinking about for this play, those add up. And then you don't see the consistency that you hope to see. And a good example of that, it's a play I put in the video. It was this Bengals play, and he has 7 guys on the line, 7 defenders on the line. So they're showing an all-out blitz, and he only has 6 guys.
Blitz, right? The cover
exactly, exactly. And that's, as you said as well, where he took that little hitch, and it was just, you have to know if all these guys come, it's simple math. We don't have enough guys, so the ball has to come out, and I just don't think that confidence was quite there. I don't think Gesicki didn't really turn his head at the right time. So you could take that a couple of different ways. Does Tua just need to anticipate Gesicki coming out of his break? Or maybe it was a play call issue, stuff like that. So I just think all those things, Tua needs to be the kind of guy where the mental ability is, if there's 7 guys on the line and we have 6, like, I'm going to dominate that play. I'm going to throw the ball on time. I'm going to throw it earlier if I need to. Those are the kind of things that he needs, like, at a higher rate than the other 2 guys. Like, that's what I thought Tua was going to be coming into the NFL, just already like mentally right there, ready to rock. So that's what I'm really hoping to see in 2021.
All right. This is the quickest question ever, but I got to ask you because people in the comments, we got 300 people in the room right now. They want to know. We've talked about his health being at 60% potentially. We've talked about how this season it seems like it's more of a playbook catered to him, and that's why the offensive coordinators have been stressing retention for him. And I mean, how is it easier to retain when it's a lot more plays that are easier and you're familiar with, right? Do you think this is the ultimate question, bro? This is it. Do you think Tua takes that leap and puts a lot of the noise to bed and a lot of the haters to bed this year?
It's tough. I don't think he's going to take the leap that we've been talking about, where it is that high of a leap, where he's the ideal leap. I don't think he takes the ideal leap, but I do think I think there were so many things out of his control that were going against him last year that I think we'll find ourselves somewhere in between of that ideal leap and then just staying where we are right now. I think the personnel is very important. I am excited. The whole Gailey thing was just weird. And like him retiring after a year, that's just weird. And what is he? Is he like, he's 80 or excuse me, he's like 70, right?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to say 80, but
he cosplays like he's 80. Don't worry.
Hey, there we go. There we go.
Oh man, that was awesome, man. We got 301 people in the room, man. Alex, I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to come on here and talk to Tua Tagovailoa with everyone and a little bit of Jalen Waddle. Can you just go ahead, plug your channel, plug anything you got coming up soon, anything you just put out, yeah, so people can go find your content.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. It was a blast. Very nice to meet you. I do an episode every week on Saturdays. It's very heavy into the all 22 aspect. So, you know, if you're interested in learning more about the coverages, the route concepts, kind of the things that you can't really see on Sunday because it's either glossed over or just not enough time for the coaches or excuse me, the announcers to get into it. That's really what my channel is all about, and just learning together and getting more of a deeper knowledge on a Tua or just any player, whoever the player is that week. But if you do want to learn more about why Tua struggled with these concepts or where he was good, what he was good at, what he's improving at, where he needs to get better, that episode and all the episodes that I do really focus on really the why. So come check me out if you're looking to learn more about football.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, we got to do this again sometime.
Sure, man. Sure.
You know, especially as the season progresses and we get to see what we actually get from Tua this year. It'll be because I know if he does take a leap, I know you'll be making a video about it. So
100%.
We're going to have to talk about that too. So, man, again, I appreciate you for coming on and taking some time out, man. Always love talking pigskin with knowledgeable people like yourself. And guys, make sure you go check him out, Alex Rollins NFL. There's not enough good things I can say about him. He does a great job over there. Been watching him for quite some time. So when he said he was willing to come on here, absolute honor and blessing to have you on here, man. Really appreciate you, Alex. And I'm sure we'll talk very soon, brother.
Appreciate the kind words, man. Appreciate it. Looking forward.
Have a good night, my friend. We'll talk.
You too.
Bye-bye.